The biggest secret in the entertainment industry that really wasn't a secret at all has finally been revealed to the world.
A law firm in Texas says thousands of people have come to them making allegations against Sean Diddy Combs with claims dating back to the 1990s. And this time, the shocking new accusations include alleged victims who say they were minors at the time. We're going to dig into these claims and how it might impact Combs' criminal case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A well-known Texas lawyer announced to a crowd of reporters on Tuesday that his law firm plans to pursue legal action against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs on behalf of more than 100 victims. More than 24 of those future plaintiffs say they were just kids when Combs allegedly assaulted them. We're talking about attorney Tony Buzbee. And it's not just Combs that he says is caught in the crosshairs.
The wall of silence has now been broken, and victims are coming forward. Our team has had at this point more than 3,285 individuals contact us with people claiming to have been victimized by Sean Combs. We now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases. I expect that through this process, many powerful people will be exposed. Many dirty secrets will be revealed. We know what we are potentially up against. As is always the case in situations like this when a celebrity is involved, people can be downright mean and nasty. You'd be shocked at the length fans will go, no matter the evidence, to the contrary, to defend celebrities they love. And there's a reason for this word fans. They're fanatics. I've personally already been threatened multiple times on social media. And when I agreed to pursue this, I expected as much. This isn't my first rodeo. But victims who step forward to have their voices heard should not be subjected to that kind of conduct. They should not be targeted.
According to Buzbee, more than 3,000 people have contacted his office so far with stories about Combs, who, by the way, is currently incarcerated in Brooklyn, New York on federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs was arrested September 16th pursuant to a grand jury indictment. His arrest came after a raid by federal investigators on his two homes, one in Miami, one in Los Angeles, back in March. Combs has also been subject to a litany of civil suits already, which really got rolling last fall when his ex, Cassandra Ventura, made shocking allegations about her relationship with Combs. Cassie claimed that Combs was abusive for nearly the entirety of their 10-year relationship. She also claimed he forced her to participate in the now infamous sex parties known as freak-offs or FOs, when commercial sex workers would be brought in to have sex with Cassie and others while the participants were allegedly under the influence of drugs. Those freak-off allegations, by the way, are also at the heart of the prosecution's case as well. And prosecutors claim that Combs recorded these sex sessions, both for his own pleasure and seemingly as potential blackmail. So to hear 100 more lawsuits raises a lot of interesting questions in terms of the timing and its relation to the criminal case. A little bit of background about the man making these very serious allegations, attorney Tony Buzbee. Now, you may recognize him. You may recognize that name. He has represented multiple women who claim that football star Deshaun Watson, who now plays for the Cleveland Browns, sexually assaulted them. In fact, he just filed a new lawsuit a few weeks ago on behalf of a woman who claims that Watson assaulted her back in 2020. Now, Watson, to be clear, hasn't been criminally charged. Two different grand juries decided not to indict him. Buzbee filed this new lawsuit after months-long negotiations with Watson's legal team apparently went nowhere. The NFL says it's doing its own investigation under its personal conduct policy. But going back to Sean Combs, that's who's now in Buzbee's sights. Now, from the more than 3,000 alleged claims made, that has been whittled down to 120 people who are moving forward with their lawsuits, according to Buzbee. Now, in response to Busby's news conference, Erica Wolf, an attorney for Sean Combs, released the following statement. Mr. Combs emphatically and categorically denies as false and defamatory any claim that he sexually abused anyone, including minors. He looks forward to proving his innocence and vindicating himself in court, where the truth will be established based on evidence, not speculation. But Busby told reporters that the future plaintiffs have, quote, legitimacy and merit thanks to corroborating evidence and witnesses. In fact, a former detective from the Houston Police Department has joined his firm to help vet people and their accounts. As Busby says that some have already even spoken with the FBI in connection with that agency's investigation into Sean Combs, and Busby says they're sharing all information that they come across. The allegations against Combs run the gamut from sexual assault and rape to false imprisonment to prostitution, and of the 120 individual plaintiffs that Busby plans to represent, he says 25 of them were minors when they say they were attacked.
You should know, in this group, it is evenly divided between males and females. There are 60 males and 60 females who have joined us to pursue these claims as plaintiffs. In this group, 62% identify as African American, 30% are white, and the remainder are Hispanic or Asian. The victims are from more than 25 states. The majority are from California, New York, Georgia, and Florida. Our youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. We have an individual who was 14 years old. We have one who was 15. 25 of the 120 individuals who are plaintiffs in these cases were minors at the time of the acts complained of. Most of these events and incidents occurred at parties, typically after parties, or album release parties, New Year's Eve parties, 4th of July parties, something they called a puppy party, the all-white party, although several of these events occurred at auditions. Many times, especially young people wanting to break into the industry, were coerced into this type of conduct in the promise of being made a star, or in the promise of having Sean Combs listen to their tape or even let them read for Sean Combs.
9 years old. To talk about this, I want to bring in trial attorney Krista Ramey, who has worked closely with child victims of sexual abuse. Krista, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. First, I want to talk about the timing of this. Comes out after the indictment, after the arrest. What do you make of the timing?
I think the timing is about perfect. So a lot of people don't come forward right away because for a number of reasons. And when you do this in this manner after the publicity that the indictment and the arrest have received, a lot of these survivors, this is really kind of top of mind for them right now. And so having this happen right now, it's kind of allowing them that safety really, and having people that have kind of tried to push this away to think about maybe I should help others. And so I think that's really kind of, some of the, more significant parts of why you do this now.
Does it hurt them though, in the sense that defense attorneys could say, you had all this time to come forward, you only come out after all the lawsuits, you only come out after Sean Combs has been criminally indicted? It would hurt their credibility in a way, or no? Is that something they would be able to fight against?
No, and a lot of states have what's called like rape shield laws that actually protect that sort of evidence to be used against a survivor of sexual abuse or sexual assault. So really, no, that can't be used that way. In the past, that's what was done. Typically, you would take that sort of evidence of, you're just coming forward now. It's all about the money. And so that's why you're doing this now. No, this is really not how, trauma survivors like reconcile what happened to them and how they push forward with life after being so traumatically abused as some of these people, it sounds like that they were. They have to come to terms with a lot of things themselves and to be able to just live and breathe and move about in the world. The last thing that they're thinking about is confronting someone as powerful and as significant in terms of their influence as Sean Combs.
No, that's a very fair argument. Here's the thing that I wanted to ask you about. Look, I've said it several times over the past few weeks that based on prior allegations made in lawsuits against Combs, given what we're just hearing now, I was surprised that there weren't any federal charges related to children in his indictment. Several of the lawsuits that Combs faces in civil court mention misconduct with minors. I'm asking you now, as we're hearing, 25 plaintiffs might come forward that they were abused as children. Does that chip away at the legitimacy of these claims regarding the minors, meaning the feds looked into it, they didn't find anything, maybe they didn't find the claims were credible? Or is it that the feds weren't aware of these claims yet and now might be looking into it? Or is there another reason for why Combs wasn't charged with respect to minors?
So that evidence still might be being collected. There could be that grand jury could still be sitting and collecting evidence and investigating this right now. There could be superseding indictments that come about. I think that we can't really make any assumptions based upon the indictment that we currently have. I think that, the credibility of those claims, a criminal case and a civil case, as you know, are very different in terms of burden of proof. In a criminal case, you have the higher standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. On the other hand, on the civil case, you have just preponderance of the evidence, which is, just more likely true than not true. If you believe one side a little bit more than the other, then that side wins. So I think that there's also that. And with minor claims, they're particularly tricky because minors' memories are not as good. And when you're talking about adding, being drugged potentially to the mix, that could even make it more complicated in terms of proving these minors' claims. And, something that I encounter frequently in my practice is that, sometimes minors will just say, I don't know, if they just don't want to talk about something. They have very distinct ways of protecting themselves. So it's a lot more difficult to work with minors, and it takes a little bit longer to build those cases. So I wouldn't say we're going to rule that out, that there might not be charges with minors. But right now, that's just what we're working with.
No, 100% he could be hit with a superseding indictment, but you would imagine that after investigating him for quite some time, if these allegations are true, why he wouldn't be hit with a charge related to minors. Because I'll tell you one thing, while his defense team is saying currently that their defense will be everything was consensual, including these freak-off sessions, when you involve a minor, consent is thrown out the window. Now, when it comes to how Combs was allegedly able to hurt so many people, and you mentioned that, allegedly was through the use of drugs. This is according to Busby. He says that victims recounted stories of being at parties, being told that they had to drink this drink that was handed to them, and if they didn't, they were kicked out. Busby alleges that once a victim was unconscious, Combs and others would rape that person. Busby also says that 55% of the victims reported the alleged assaults to police or hospital staff, but says they weren't believed and further action wasn't taken. Krista, if that's true, what does that tell you?
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? A lot of these cases, I think, it depends on how far back in time they go, really, too, whether that evidence does or does not exist. But oftentimes when survivors go, to police or, investigators about really powerful people. And those powerful people can have a lot of people around them that say, I never saw her before. She wasn't at my party. I have no idea what you're talking about. You kind of get this culture of protecting those celebrities. We've seen this with a lot of very powerful people in the past. We saw this with Weinstein. We saw this with Epstein. We saw this with Tyndall. We saw this with, all of these really powerful men that had the ability to control the world around them, and influence others to protect them. And I think that that's a lot of what you have here is you have people that don't have any power or influence that are confronted with power and influence and have not been able to break through that until more recently.
And by the way, apparently, according to Busby, the toxicology reports, the toxicology testing at hospitals revealed what he called weird drugs in the victim's systems, and this included cocaine and a horse tranquilizer referred to as trank. So, Krista, that would be solid evidence if you have those reports. I guess the other way to strike it, those would say maybe they weren't coerced into taking those drugs, but they consented, and that might not be sufficient for the claims. But again, those toxicology reports, I think, are pretty significant if they exist.
Yeah, they're very significant. And, I guess that goes to, the argument that Combs's lawyer is already making, that this is voluntary. So it's voluntary consumption of drugs. It's voluntary entering into sexual, relationships with multiple people in an evening. So that's the argument that Combs and his lawyers are putting forward, that this was all consensual. Now, like you said, the minors, that doesn't really work. And, but this is all very good evidence that these people have, is if they did go to the hospital, if they did go to the police and they got this evidence. And what Begsby is doing right now, he's got over 3,000 calls, and he's whittled that down to 120. He's probably going to have more plaintiffs as well once they start investigating it. But he's getting corroborating evidence from other people, because while the police might not have believed, there's probably a lot of people that these victims told kind of at the same time, right about when things were happening. People might have noticed things. They might have had confidential conversations with things. They might have went to therapy, and their therapists know things. So there's going to be corroborating evidence that Begsby is going to get before making these claims in a court of law, which will be much different than doing it behind a podium in a press conference.
And this point is important to point out, that Busby says that these attacks happened at private residences of, quote, people we all know. But he didn't really say who those people are and wasn't quite ready to reveal those alleged perpetrators. Take a look.
The day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and there's a lot of names. It's a long list already. And of course, I already know who some of these individuals are, but because of the nature of this case, we're going to make damn sure that we're right before we do that. But the names that we're going to name, assuming that our investigators confirm and corroborate what we've been told, are names that will shock you. These are individual cases. There are indeed other perpetrators involved. They will be revealed when that particular individual case is ready to be filed. They already know who they are. And I'm talking here about not just the cowardly but complicit bystanders. That is, those people that we know watched this behavior occur and did nothing. But I'm talking about the people that participated, encouraged it, egged it on. They know who they are.
Krista, that is a very big claim. And if you're about to reveal, who knows who you're about to reveal, very big names in the course of 120 lawsuits, what are the ramifications of that? Because let's be clear, federal prosecutors haven't named anybody yet. And so there's a reason for that too. But if you're about to name high-profile people, celebrities, I mean, what can we expect? What are the ramifications of that?
I think there's been a lot of buzz going along about who might be named, and that people throwing out names of who they think might be named. Clearly these people know who they are. They know where they've been and how closely they've been involved. I don't think that it's going to be just people that are close friends with Diddy or may have been at these parties. It's going to be people that are participating and are intertwined with what happened. And you also heard Busby in that same kind of segment, I believe, right there, talk about not just people, but corporations, banks, hotel chains that also will be like defendants potentially in this litigation, that knew or should have known what was happening under their roof or with their money or with their with their participation and help. So it's not just very important, powerful people. It's going to be also corporations, which I think is not surprising.
The attorneys representing Combs in both his civil and criminal cases say he has never sex trafficked anyone or sexually assaulted anyone. Mark Agnifilo represents Combs in the criminal case.
His resolve is the same. He believes he's innocent. I believe he's innocent. And we're going to fight this case with all of our might until we don't have to fight any longer.
Now, you might recall that Combs is being sued in civil court by about a dozen people claiming they were sex trafficked, sexually assaulted, or abused in some other type of way. I told you Ariel Mitchell Kidd had bombshells. The next one has to do with her claim that she's been contacted by a person who said that they want to sell a sex tape in a catch and kill type of operation, and that the video shows Sean Combs engaged in sex with a celebrity who's more high profile than he is. News Nation actually broke this news about the purported video. It really got me wondering, who could be more high profile than Sean Combs? He's been a public figure for decades, and he's a billionaire. Ariel Mitchell Kidd is going to provide more details about that video here shortly. And you may recall that Mitchell Kidd was representing Adria English, an adult entertainer suing Combs, claiming that he trafficked her at his white parties. There's news on that front as well, so stay tuned. But first, let's get back to the new accuser that Mitchell Kidd said she's now representing in a claim against Sean Combs. Tell me a little bit, first of all, about this new client that you are representing.
Yes, I had a young lady reach out to me about 2.5 weeks ago in reference to a sexual assault that occurred in 2018 by Mr. Combs and another individual that Mr. Combs directed to assault her. She was able to escape the assault and ran out into the street, and a neighbor heard her. This was a very quiet neighborhood in Northern California, and heard her and brought her in the house, and the police were called, and she filed a police report. I've actually been in talks already with the police department that she filed the police report with. I am actively working with them to figure out what did and did not happen and why things were not, I don't want to say taken seriously, but what type of investigation was conducted once my client made that those statements and made that report to the police. And I am in the process now of writing her complaint and getting it filed in California courts.
So you're telling me a woman contacted you and said, I actually called police in 2018 about being sexually assaulted by Sean Combs, but yet we never heard about it?
She did tell me that when she initially made the report, she didn't say who it was. She later did call and amend. She said she felt almost crazy that if she were to say who it was, that they wouldn't have believed her when she initially made the report. And I've had that similarly happen to my client in the Trey Songz case, where Mr. Combs, if you look up my case that's currently still pending in litigation in Florida with Trey Songz, Mr. Combs is listed as a defendant in that case. I also had a case with Chris Brown the following year in 2022, where my client, two young ladies, were raped on a boat at Sean Combs's home. And imagine me as an attorney making these statements, advancing these things in court. No one was willing to listen to me in 2021 and 2022. So I can only imagine in 2018 when she did make this phone call to police and was very nervous about saying who it was, that why she wouldn't have said it initially, but she did later on amend her complaint to let the police know it was Mr. Combs.
So there is physically a police report at a police department in Northern California that says, you know, I am this person, my name, and Sean Combs sexually assaulted me.
Yes, that's to my understanding. I'm waiting to get an official. I called the police department there. I spoke to several individuals in the police department, including the records department, and they're the ones who instructed me of their procedure. I needed, because I'm an attorney representing a client, needed to send them a letter on my letterhead, which is what I did, to request a copy of all of the reports and all of the documentations and whatever investigation I would assume that they did, which is what I'm now in the process of waiting for them to return back to me.
Now, Ariel Mitchell-Kidd is not naming the police department where the report was filed, not at this point. She said the assault occurred at the home of a friend of this woman and that her friend knew Sean Combs, who then arrived.
This friend, who she claims is a person who is in the industry and well-connected, Mr. Combs called this individual and said, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I'm chilling at my home. And Ms. Combs said, I'm going to come over. It's actually very funny because I saw a Russell Brand interview recently, and he was talking about now that he's become friends with Mr. Combs, it's like now if he asks me to walk his dog or feed his fish, it's like he's very imposing. You can't tell him no. And it was really jarring for me to hear this Russell Brand interview after hearing the story that my client told me.
Now, I've told you in prior Crime Fix episodes about Sean Combs' former chief of staff, Christina Coram, who was by his side beginning in 2013. Record producer Rodney Little Rod Jones called Coram Sean Combs' Ghislaine Maxwell. Sean Combs has denied the allegations that he has sex trafficked anyone. Mitchell-Kidd says her new client brought up Christina Coram's name in their conversations.
She actually also identified Christina Coram, who Mr. Combs has called KK, and has talked about her in several interviews. And when he received the BET Award, where he talked about thanks, shout out to Cassie for holding me in the dark times. He actually started off with KK. And she said, I never knew who that lady was. She was with him that night. It wasn't until recently, when the pictures have been coming across all over the internet of her, that she said, this is the lady who was there that night. It was a lady who I described to the police, who I did not identify or have a name, but that the Christina Coram lady was the one who had started to make jokes about sex trafficking my client, that she would be very good on the open market kind of thing. She said that kind of made her feel uncomfortable. And then she got a drink and then started to feel woozy. And then Mr. Combs first sexually assaulted her with an inanimate object, and then directed another gentleman who was there to then penetrate her while he was in the corner pleasuring himself, while Mr. Combs was in the corner pleasuring himself.
So this almost sounds like what's been alleged in these freak off situations.
Absolutely. It was, and I've talked to several other individuals who I have not taken on as clients. I do not take on everyone who contacts me as a client. There's a level of due diligence that I do conduct and a level of evidence that I need to see in order to make a good faith basis to file a complaint. I do have obligations as an attorney and the bar ethically, and I also have my own moral obligations. So when we come and talk about things of this nature, I always have to use some type of corroborating evidence, either from individuals as witnesses, pictures, something to corroborate that this actually occurred. So I've had other individuals call me and tell me very similar stories, but unfortunately, those individuals were not American citizens. They were foreign nationals who were trafficked into Miami by Mr. Combs. But because I could not verify their story, I was unable to take them on as clients.
So she says Christina Coram was there, present. This was Sean Combs's chief of staff until somewhat recently. But this is somebody who knows everything about what's going on with Sean Combs. Do you plan on naming her in the suit and suing her?
She will be named as a defendant in this lawsuit. I'm coming after just like Mr. Combs was listed as a defendant in the Trey Songz lawsuit. Anybody who had something to do with it, I'm not going to shy away from coming after them. I think there should be other people indicted with Mr. Combs, but, you know, as the government goes, they just want the big fish. But the problem is the big fish can't be the big fish without the little fish helping them accomplish their nefarious goals.
So Ariel Mitchell-Kidd says Sean Combs and Christina Coram will be named in this lawsuit. Coram's social media has gone dark over the last 6 months, and she's nearly impossible to find. Now to the video that Mitchell-Kidd says she's seen screen grabs of, showing Combs and a person more high profile than Combs engaged in sex. Mitchell-Kidd told me how she became aware of the video.
So about a month ago, I got contacted by an individual purporting to have some very sensitive information. And they also purported to me to have they're in possession of 3 tapes, not just 1 tape with Mr. Combs, but they were only interested in pursuing this 1 tape and were looking for legal representation, mainly, like you just said, because they had saw me being actively involved in civil lawsuits against Mr. Combs, that I would be somebody they were interested in to facilitate doing something with the tapes. Initially, I wasn't sure, and they weren't exactly clear on whether or not it was going to be like a catch and kill or facilitating the sale to another third party. I actually called one of my business partners and mentors and had been telling him about this pretty much since the onset of it. They invited me, the individuals who have the video invited me to California, to LA, to come and view the tapes in person. I was hesitant to do so only because once I know something, I'm obligated, based on being an officer of the court, to tell the court what I saw and what I knew. They offered to send me screenshots through text messages, which I declined. And I ended up saying, well, let's FaceTime and then you can show me. This way I have a sense of no evidence or plausible deniability in terms of things that I've actually received or actually seen with my own 2 eyes. And in those couple of stills that they showed me was Mr. Combs and another very shocking, I would imagine, very jarring for a lot of people, individuals in a very pornographic nature.
So, Ariel, I have to push you a little bit on this. You've said it's somebody more high profile, and you're saying individuals, plural, more high profile than Sean Combs. I mean, are we talking more high profile in Hollywood? Are we talking a politician? I mean, what are we talking about here?
No, it's someone in the entertainment industry, and I would say this person is undisputably more famous than Mr. Combs. I don't think anybody would argue if they were to know who it was, that would be a true statement.
So the person in the video who's more high profile than Sean Combs, is this a man or a woman?
I'm not going to say.
Now, I don't want to get too graphic, but I asked Mitchell Kidd about what else she could see in the video and who. And this is what prosecutors would call a freak off tape.
I can't see other people in the video. I can't determine. I actually called one of my other clients. When I got this call Thursday, they finally Thursday night called me and came out with it and said, we're ready to move forward with selling this tape. Can you broker the deal? We'll give you X percentage to sell this tape to the other individual in the tape. And I was like, let me, I don't know. I kind of really pulled back a lot and said, well, let me make some phone calls and I'll let you know. So one of the phone calls was to another client that I have who I know to have been a friend of the individual who they wanted to sell the tape to and was very close to that individual around the time the tape would have been made. So I wanted to get his perspective on what he felt, my client, how he felt about just everything in general. Would this be something that the other person would be interested in purchasing? Would this, how should I feel about participating in this? I'm talking to my client now to see if he's willing to talk about that conversation that we had. But I also feel like the minute he does that, everybody will automatically know who it is.
Have you ever been contacted about something like that before and asked to broker a deal?
Absolutely. I do this behind the scenes for several A-list celebrities, people who I would never tell you about or anybody else about because I'm paid very well to do this for them and to catch and kill a lot of things on their behalf, things that either they may have gotten themselves into or somebody else got them into. So this is not something I'm a novice on. I've done it many a times before. However, this is a lot more high profile now that the feds are involved and the other individual. I'm actually more concerned for the other individual in the tape than I am Mr. Combs.
Now, you might be asking yourself, why is Ariel Mitchell Kidd making this public? The information about the videos with Sean Combs and somebody else.
And part of the reason why I made this statement Friday was, how do I say, I'm very concerned about the other person in the video. I was concerned that the individuals who contacted me to sell the video, if they were to do something, I didn't want anybody to say I had knowledge of something and I didn't say anything, one. And two, if something were to happen to me because of this knowledge that I had, I wanted it to be known that like, look at these people, because it'd probably be them who would have done something to me. Not that I'm per se fearful, but anything, it's been a crazy tipsy-topsy world, especially when we're talking about Mr. Combs.
Have you been threatened at all since you've become involved with, especially with Adria English, obviously, but have you received any threats?
I was threatened by Mr. Combs previously. So in my work with the Trey Songz case, I was told by several individuals, including a celebrity chef and some other people who were close to him, that if I didn't cease my persistence in that lawsuit and then the situation with Chris Brown, that my life was in danger.
Wow. Did you ever report that to law enforcement?
I did not. I didn't want to include the other people. I just bought more guns and then I moved out of the state.
I reached out to Sean Combs' reps for comment on this new accuser, the video, and Mitchell Kidd's claims that Combs had previously threatened her when she sued him as part of the Trey Songz lawsuit. At the time of this recording, I have not received a response. Songz has denied the claims in that suit. Now back to Adria English, that adult entertainer who's suing Sean Combs, accusing him of sex trafficking her at his white parties from 2004 to 2009. Combs has denied he has sex trafficked anyone. I want to talk just briefly about Adria English, somebody that you filed suit on behalf of in the last many months. It was in July. You're no longer representing her.
Unfortunately, me and Miss English had an issue with a violation, a breach of our contract. So I have had to stop my representation. Once we get to a point where I have a client breaching a contract, I have to end the representation.
If 12 civil lawsuits and 3 federal charges weren't enough, Sean P. Diddy Combs is now up against more than 100 new shocking accusations in his alleged sex trafficking scheme that spanned multiple decades. Diddy's fall from grace started nearly 1 year ago in November 2023, when his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, filed a bombshell civil lawsuit against him. Cassie's lawsuit laid out some major claims against the once beloved music icon, saying that over the course of their years-long relationship, Diddy physically, verbally, and sexually assaulted Cassie. And she didn't shy away from any of the details either. She gave specific examples of Diddy's alleged abuse, like when he forced her to carry illegal firearms or have sex with prostitutes. And Cassie's lawsuit also introduced us to the now infamous term freak-off. She says it started when Mr. Combs hired a man and brought the man to his home in Los Angeles. The man, Mr. Combs, and Miss Ventura wore masquerade masks and ingested drugs. Mr. Combs directed Miss Ventura to perform sexual acts with this man while Mr. Combs watched them. He allegedly masturbated while he directed Miss Ventura and the man to do specific sexual acts. Mr. Combs began to call the arrangement a freak-off, or FO. He would repeatedly tell Miss Ventura at random moments that he wanted an FO, and Miss Ventura was eventually expected to facilitate the location and the hiring of male sex workers. These same allegations were made over multiple other civil lawsuits, including the one filed by Rodney Jones, who's also known as the producer Lil Rod. His lawsuit was filed back in February and also specifically mentions freak-offs. Lil Rod alleges he saw a similar pattern to what Cassie described, saying he was sexually assaulted by Diddy, forced to consume drugs, and even have sex with a prostitute. This same lawsuit alleges there are hundreds of hours of video and audio recordings of Diddy and others participating in this illegal activity. We now know that when federal authorities raided Diddy's homes back in March, they were collecting some of that electronic evidence, and now it's being used in the case against him. The federal indictment against Diddy mentions this evidence and also defines freak-offs, saying they were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. Okay, I know you're multitasking when you're watching our videos, and if you're out running errands, listen up. I have to tell you about the free app Upside that gets you cash back on daily essentials. It's something I use every time I pump gas because it's easy and it's free, so why not? All you have to do is get the Upside app and then claim an offer for whatever you're buying. You pay as usual and then just follow the steps on the app to get paid. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on the screen and use our promo code LCNews to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. But allegedly, Diddy wasn't the only one involved in this illegal activity. The federal indictment confirms what Lil Rod said. Diddy's associates would assist in the planning and execution of these freak-offs. These associates facilitated the freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting, cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak-offs to try to mitigate room damage, arranging for travel for victims, commercial sex workers, and Combs to and from freak-offs, resupplying Combs with requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash to Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and scheduling the delivery of IV fluids. During the federal raids, investigators collected some freak-off items, including more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. Prosecutors used all this evidence and more to move forward with Diddy's charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Diddy's pleaded not guilty to these charges and says his side of the story will come out at trial. All the while, Diddy is behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, having been denied bail twice. And while Diddy is literally in a holding pattern, the case against him continues to build, with a wave of new civil lawsuits soon headed his way. This week, Houston-based attorney Tony Buzbee announced 120 civil lawsuits against Diddy will be filed in the next 30 days. If that number is staggering, consider this one, the number of people that initially reported the sexual abuse. Buzbee says it's thousands. Now, the lawsuits haven't been filed yet, so we're still unclear about specific information like dates or names. Here's what we do know. Buzbee says the assaults took place in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York, dating as far back as 1991. 60 of the plaintiffs are women and the other 60 are men, and of them, 25 alleged they were sexually assaulted as minors, the youngest of which was only 9 years old when the sexual assault occurred. Others were only 14 or 15. Over the dozens of lawsuits, plaintiffs will describe new allegations against Diddy, including violent sexual assault or rape, sexual abuse, facilitating sex with controlled substances, false imprisonment, compelling prostitution, sexual misconduct, dissemination of video recordings, and sexual abuse of minors. And then there's the other people involved. Diddy's associates could be named in these coming lawsuits, but so too could be some high-profile names. Buzbee says he can't tell us the names specifically, but that they are high-profile and will shock us. In an interview just this week, Buzbee told me some of the allegations in these new civil lawsuits could mean even more charges are filed.
What I'm hoping is, and I'm encouraging my clients, to those that, to the extent that they are willing to do so, to make themselves available to the federal authorities, to tell their story. And I expect the indictment will grow. I expect there will be more counts.
If the federal indictment does in fact grow, how would that even work? Could any of these soon-to-be-revealed high-profile names be listed as co-defendants? Here's where we turn to former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi for some more insight. So, just starting talking about these more than 100 new civil lawsuits that are about to be filed against P. Diddy, what's your initial take just hearing that number, 120 new lawsuits?
Well, the number that really shocked me is there were 3,000 people that contacted this team of lawyers, and they pared it down to only 120. So they probably have other victims that they could use if they have to, but 120 is just enormous. And that shows to me, and these are allegations, they have to be proven, both criminally and civilly. It shows to me that for the last 20 years, allegedly, Diddy has been engaging in quite a massive enterprise that violates federal criminal laws and state laws.
And since this news of these 120 lawsuits, you said 3,000 people had come forward. I actually spoke to the attorney who's planning to file, and he said thousands more came forward after this. So do you think it's possible this is just the start of civil suits against P. Diddy?
Well, it reminds me of the quarterback, Deshaun Watson. I think he's now the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. But Deshaun Watson only had about 20 to 25 accusers. When you get into three digits, 120, probably 150 at the end of the day, that's just enormous. And two things happen. Number one, his legal fees are going to be incredibly high. He'll have to get a team of 25 lawyers to handle all these lawsuits. But the key word is distraction. Sierra, he's facing a federal indictment, propounded by one of the top U.S. attorney's offices in the country, the Southern District of New York. They're the varsity. They're geniuses. And they don't indict somebody because it's a slow day in the grand jury. So he has that big monster federal indictment. And now he's going to have approximately 120 civil suits. I don't know how he's going to survive financially, if not emotionally.
That leads into my next question about the prosecution against Diddy, because he's now been indicted on 3 federal charges, as you said, super severe. But what are prosecutors thinking as they're hearing about these new lawsuits? Do you think they're going to investigate them and maybe add charges?
If I'm a prosecutor, number one, they may add charges. They don't have to, but they may add charges. But more important, when I'm a prosecutor, and I was one for a long time, and there's a civil suit going on, it's a two-edged sword. That civil suit could give you more evidence, could give you more victims, could give you more information, but it also could jeopardize the credibility of potential witnesses in your criminal trial because they'll be deposed, they'll be questioned, and they will be subject to civil discovery. So there's that tension. I had a criminal case against a pain doctor, and there was a civil lawsuit, a wrongful death suit. It was an overdose, and that civil lawsuit actually very much helped my criminal case, because the defendant in my criminal case made some statements in the civil case that were not helpful to him in my case. So it can help the prosecutors, but it can hurt the credibility of witnesses. It's a high wire act.
I mean, it's just an overwhelming number of people who say they were victimized by P. Diddy. There are more than 1,000 now at this point, at least according to the attorney who's bringing these suits. But what's interesting is that in the federal indictment, there's only one victim that's listed as victim one. Why do you think that is, that federal prosecutors only included that one victim rather than the hundreds of others?
What the prosecutors did is they filed or presented to the grand jury this indictment with one victim, just to get something filed so he would be arrested and detained and jailed. I will be shocked if the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York do not supersede, amend, if you will, and add additional charges and additional victims. I would be shocked if they do not do that. So the first indictment is just a taste of what's to come.
What will that look like as federal prosecutors are potentially going to add, as you said, future charges, future victims? What's going on behind the scenes right now? Are they interviewing other people? Are they coming together and deciding what charges would be appropriate? What would that look like?
They are interviewing other people. They may be conducting grand jury testimony if they're looking at additional charges. They can't use the grand jury to build a case against the charges that are returned and approved already, but they can look at other charges. And that's what they're doing right now. And as I said in one of my earlier appearances with you, they're probably working 24/7, working Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. And for those prosecutors in the Southern District, this case will be consuming their life for at least the next 2 years.
And you know what was interesting to me when I read the indictment is that there was no mention of any child sexual abuse. This is something we heard rumblings of for many years, that Diddy had allegedly sexually assaulted people who were minors. And now with these new 120 lawsuits, there are some pretty stark accusations that he sexually assaulted kids as young as 9, 14 years old. Is that something that federal prosecutors might take a look at?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's nothing that inflames the passions of a jury than the exploitation of someone who's underage. And if you have a victim who's 9 years old, 11, 12, 13, 14, in their early teens, that is incredibly powerful for a prosecutor to present to a jury. And as I understand it, these 120 potential lawsuits, the ages range from a high of 38 to as low as age 9. And I also understand that about 2/3 are African American, a third are white. We have women and men. So you have the full panoply. But here's what else is important. According to the articles, the attorneys who are representing the civil victims, civil suits, they're going to list as defendants, not just Diddy, but other people. And according to the attorneys, some of those other people, those other co-defendants, they may be names that will be easily recognizable by the general public.
You just brought up the next part that I wanted to talk about, that we're not sure who these names are as of yet, but some people have said they're even more popular than P. Diddy or even more A-list, that we're going to be shocked by these names. Again, let's not speculate on who it could be. We could see this soon, hopefully. But what does that mean for those people, celebrities who right now are thinking, okay, yeah, I was at a Diddy party back in the day. I did participate. What's going on for them?
I can tell you this. Those people you're talking about that may be co-defendants of Diddy, they know who they are. And they are not getting sleep right now. And they're probably getting attorneys because they're going to face a civil suit and possibly a criminal. And you could see the prosecutors in the Southern District, based on information in the civil suits, maybe adding a couple of co-defendants in the federal indictment. Now, if they do that, it kind of raises legal issues, motions for severance, things like that. It could delay trials. So they may keep it just against Diddy because it'll be simple and straightforward, sort of like what Jack Smith did against Mr. Trump. He had one defendant, Mr. Trump, in the January 6th case to keep it simple. Prosecutors may do that and just have it against Diddy, but they may add co-defendants. But those civil suits, they're going to have co-defendants for sure.
Now, it does seem to me that prosecutors want to nail Diddy, so to speak. I mean, he's the kingpin behind all of this, and he's the one who has been indicted as of now. So if these other names could be added as co-defendants, we'll see. But I'm wondering if potentially they would speak with prosecutors or investigators and flip and testify for the prosecution rather than become a co-defendant, potentially.
When I was a prosecutor, I always referred to the pancake theory. You try to get people to cooperate and flip them like pancakes so you can use them in your case. So if the prosecutors are going to keep this case simple and just against Diddy, those other people who may be culpable, as I say, I will try to flip them like a pancake and I'll offer them some options. One is immunity, and prosecutors don't generally like to give immunity. Two is say, listen, we're not going to add you to this case. We may charge you separately. So why don't you pay now as opposed to paying later and cooperate, plead guilty, and hope for leniency at your sentencing? That's probably what could happen.
Taking a look again at these new civil suits, again, they haven't been filed yet, so we don't know for sure the entire details of them. We'll have to wait and see. But something that we have heard is it kind of shows the pattern that we've heard since the start with Diddy, that he would drug these people, then sexually assault them, oftentimes record it. So this has been documented throughout these civil suits at least a dozen times now, moving toward 120 times. Do you think this will be helpful for the prosecution to establish that he had some sort of pattern with all of this?
Oh, absolutely. Because they have charged basically a RICO in the federal case, and any crime that he committed that's part of that enterprise, that RICO, that will be admissible at trial. And here's the other thing. Those victims, whether it's 3,000 or 120, they may have text messages, emails, recordings, voicemail messages, videos that may help the government, and they will readily turn that over.
Again, it's just overwhelming, the number of accusers, now lawsuits. Diddy is in trouble, to say the least. But what kind of defense do you think he could bring? He's been very outspoken through his attorney that we're going to fight this. Diddy says he's going to testify. But how could they combat all of these witness testimony and the evidence? I mean, is that even possible?
Anything's possible. And of course, he's presumed innocent. They're allegations. But here's the nub. When you have a case like this, the only defense that is viable, if there is one, is you have to attack the credibility of the victims and say they consented, they were all in, they weren't coerced, and it sounds horrible what happened in terms of these freak-offs, but it was a mutual understanding and that there was no exploitation, no crime, although it was sordid and lascivious, as they say. But that would be the key defense, is that they were all in and they consented. But will a jury believe that? We shall see.
Diddy was awarded a key to New York City by New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who is facing his own controversies. But in the aftermath of the surveillance video being released showing Diddy brutally assaulting Cassie when she was trying to escape her hotel room with him was made public, the backlash was swift, prompting Mayor Adams to request the key back. In a statement, Adams said he was deeply disturbed by the assault video. He wrote, "I strongly condemn these actions and stand in solidarity with all survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. Our city has worked tirelessly to make sure survivors are heard and seen by our administration." Diddy himself also released an apology video after the video was made public. And while he didn't mention Cassie's name, he claimed his horrific actions were because he was going through a difficult time.
I was f***ed up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy. Going to rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
Diddy returned the key to New York City on June 10th. And another U.S. city wanted nothing to do with the disgraced mogul. In 2016, Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine announced that October 13th would be a day to recognize Diddy, dubbing it Sean Diddy Combs Day. The producer, of course, has ties there, where he owns a mansion right there on Star Island. That same mansion, along with his L.A. mansion, was raided by federal agents in March of this year. But on June 26, just 3 months after the raids, the Miami Beach Commission revoked the proclamation, stating in the resolution, "Upon reflection, the mayor and city commission have determined that recognizing October 13, 2016 as Sean Diddy Combs Day is no longer in harmony with the city's values of safety, community well-being, and respect, and wish to rescind the proclamation." And that decision was reportedly made without any debate. The streaming service Hulu was in its early development stages of making a reality show about Diddy and his family. According to Variety, the show was being developed with the working title Diddy Plus 7, which was being produced by James Corden's production company, and the series was supposed to follow the lives of Diddy and his 7 children. But in December of last year, the show was scrapped in the wake of the sexual misconduct lawsuits he faced. In November, the Capital Preparatory School in Harlem, which is a public tuition-free charter school Diddy co-founded, cut ties with the mogul. At the time, the school's co-founder, Dr. Steve Perry, released a statement following their decision. It stated, "Following a comprehensive evaluation, a decision has been made to end the partnership between Capital Preparatory Schools and Sean Combs." That news arrived soon after Diddy stepped down as chairman of Revolt TV, the TV network he co-founded in 2013. In a statement posted to the network's Instagram page, it read in part, quote, "While Mr. Combs had previously no operational or day-to-day role in the business, the decision helps to ensure that Revolt remains steadfastly focused on our mission to create meaningful content for the culture and amplify the voices of all Black people through this country and the African diaspora. Our focus has always been one that reflects our commitment to the collective journey of Revolt, one that is not driven by any individual, but by the shared efforts and values of our entire team on behalf of advocating, elevating, and championing our culture, and that continues." At the time it was reported Diddy's decision to step down as chairman was described as temporary and didn't appear to be a full resignation. But all that appeared to change just months later. According to a TMZ report, Diddy had sold off all of his shares of Revolt TV to an anonymous buyer for an undisclosed amount. On June 4th, it was announced Diddy had sold his majority stake in Revolt, making the new owners the chief executive and their coalition of employees. Salexico, who previously managed Diddy as an artist, no longer lists him as a client on their website. According to Billboard, Diddy hired the artist management company, which manages the likes of The Weeknd, Ty Dolla $ign, French Montana, and Brandy back in 2021. Prior to his fall from grace in July of 2023, Diddy announced he'd be launching Empower Global, which according to his team was a curated immersive e-commerce platform that allows consumers to discover and buy products exclusively created and sold by Black entrepreneurs. Diddy founded the company in 2021. After the company was launched, he told the Associated Press in an interview he wanted to create the Black Wall Street and felt passionate about building wealth within his community, even investing $20 million into the platform. But by the end of the year, nearly 20 companies terminated their partnership with the e-commerce platform, one company even telling Rolling Stone magazine they made the decision after Cassie filed her lawsuit against Diddy. And while it's been reported there's been a jump in music streams since Diddy's arrest last week, an 18.3% increase in on-demand streams, don't expect to hear his music if you're taking a Peloton class. The exercise company said in June they are hitting pause of playing his music in their workout class platform. According to CNN, Peloton didn't indicate if they were removing his music from past classes, but confirmed their instructors are no longer using his music in any newly produced classes. Even the university Diddy loves so much didn't want his name attached to them. Diddy previously attended Howard University from '87 to '89 and received an honorary degree to the prestigious HBCU in 2014. But in the wake of the brutal assault video released by CNN in June, Howard's Board of Trustees unanimously voted to revoke the honorary degree. The university said in a statement, Mr. Combs' behavior captured in a recently released video is fundamentally incompatible with Howard University's core values and beliefs, that he is deemed no longer worthy to hold the institution's highest honor. In addition to the scathing statement, the university said they were getting rid of the scholarship that was established in his name in 2016 and were returning his $1 million donation to the program. According to Vulture, Howard University is also canceling a 2023 pledge agreement with the Sean Combs Foundation, but said no money will be returned since no payments have been made yet. Diddy was also once a staple in fashion events across the globe, even founding his own company, Sean John, in '98, and established a distribution deal with Macy's department store 12 years later in May of 2010, making it the sole distributor at the online and retail level. But in November of last year, that would change when Macy's announced they were pulling the clothing line from their department and online stores due to Diddy's sexual assault allegations, ending their 13-year partnership with the mogul. Despite many companies distancing themselves or cutting ties with the Bad Boy Records founder, Diddy is still a wealthy man with an estimated net worth still in the hundreds of millions. But it's likely a lot of his money will be tied up into lawyers fighting his federal sex trafficking case and the nearly dozen lawsuits he still faces. I'm joined now by a great guest, and that's criminal defense attorney Serena Townsend. Serena, it's always so great to see you. Now, before we get into the empire that is Sean Diddy Combs, I have to ask for your reaction on his arrest. I know we've spoken in the past and you knew it was imminent, but after it actually happened, what was your reaction?
You know, I wasn't necessarily surprised. Of course, we kind of saw this coming after search warrants were executed. Usually that's a bad sign. But, you know, the detail in the indictment was pretty eye-opening and alarming. So, you know, I just think the public is pretty appalled by what we're seeing and hearing here. And so even though we might have expected an arrest, I think the details of everything that's coming out little by little is pretty alarming to hear.
And Diddy was once a man whose name held a lot of power, once valued at $1 billion, maybe now 600, 700 million, which is still so much money. And last week, 2 federal judges decided to hold him behind bars until trial, partly because of allegations he's tampered with witnesses, but also in part that he might flee. But what are your thoughts on just how much money he's still worth, despite many businesses and companies cutting ties with him in the wake of the lawsuits he's faced and the brutal assault video that was released by CNN over the summer?
He's got his hands in everything. You know, he obviously started out as a music mogul, built an empire out of that. But it looks like, you know, aside from that, he's built a clothing company, Sean John. He's built, you know, every type of thing. He's actually a trailblazer on that front. A lot of other people had followed in his path with respect to that. So he knows how to make his money. But unfortunately, he did so illegally through this criminal enterprise. And I think, you know, a judge is going to look at that and say, well, can we really rely on this person who has so much power and influence and money to come back to court and face these very strong allegations? The answer is clearly no. We cannot trust that he will, and therefore he's going to have to be detained throughout the pendency of his case.
And does it come as a surprise to you that some companies waited until the assault video came out to cut ties with him and not when Cassie first filed her lawsuit?
That just goes to show you where people's mindset is. It's so unfortunate. There are very few people, and particularly people who are, in big business, money hungry people, who are willing to just do the right thing, who are willing to hear out victims. We see this all of the time, and this is just a prime example where here's a credible woman who's come out with very bad claims against an individual. And sure, I understand, obviously, the concept of innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, you have to wonder, why didn't anyone listen to this woman or the many women who might have come out beforehand? Why is it only now, when it's obvious and publicized and known to so many people, are these people stepping back from promoting and associating with Diddy?
And I thought it was pretty interesting that Diddy's attorney previously claimed he knew the federal government was looking into him. They knew an indictment was coming. Do you think his business practices, as far as selling his shares, trying to sell his home, even giving back the music rights to his artists last year, was because they knew the feds were looking into him?
Absolutely. I think he's getting advice from very intelligent individuals, advisors. You got to shed all of your property. You got to shed as much money as possible. You got to do what you have to do in order to insulate yourself. What the government is going to try to do is seize all of the profits from the criminal enterprise itself, right? So if he distances himself from it, he sells off his shares, he buries it somewhere, he does some creative moving of money, he's going to be able to divorce himself from those funds. And that in and of itself is essentially criminal behavior, potentially. But that is what he's going to be advised to do. And if he's looking ahead and knowing what might be down the road for him with respect to forfeiture of that money by the government, he's going to try to get rid of it as soon as possible.
Diddy's accused of doing these horrific and heinous things, not just to women, but also to men when it comes to the sex trafficking case. But then there's this flip side of him doing good in the community, for small Black owned businesses to helping students get an education. What do you make of this, given everything that we know now?
What you have to make from this is that people are people, right? Nobody is purely evil. Nobody is purely good. There's no doubt in my mind that he has done good things for the community and that he's done good things in his life. He's probably helped a lot of friends. He's helped his family. And so, nobody can be painted with such a broad brush of this man is purely evil or purely good. And that's just what, you're seeing in a situation like this. And that's what his lawyer is going to latch onto when, eventually he's going to make a pitch for leniency.
And he's still worth that estimated hundreds of millions of dollars. But say he does beat the charges. Do you think that he'll still be worth that amount of money, or will his empire be brought down because he's spending it all on lawyers at this point?
These are the kinds of things that destroy empires. Absolutely. He's going to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees. He's obviously already moved money away from himself. And frankly, if he ends up incarcerated, he's really just not going to have the access and the power and the control over his funds, over his enterprises. And unless, he has successors who are willing to continue that and pay him out for it, and businesses that are willing to align themselves with those successors, I think we're seeing the demise of P. Diddy.
And what do you think his alleged victims are thinking at this time? Not just, and when I say alleged victims, I'm not talking just about Cassie Ventura, but also the other women and men, including Rodney Jones Jr. in this, who have also come forward, accused Diddy again of these horrific and heinous things. What do you think they're kind of thinking right now, that this man who was once held in such high esteem, he was once so powerful, had all this money and power to kind of make things go away for himself. But in the flip side now, as we know, he's behind bars. What do you think that they're thinking right now?
I assume they have hope. I assume that they are cautiously optimistic. I think they are feeling finally a small measure of power themselves. This is not your typical situation. There's so many unfortunate, sex crimes that happen in this world. And there's so many people who commit crimes and there's so many victims of those people. But it's very rare to be victimized by somebody who you think cannot be taken down. The power, the money, the influence, the team of, lawyers and associates, violence, manipulation, just all of it. It checks every box. And so I have to assume that the people who he has victimized allegedly have been probably thinking this whole time, I'm never going to, see justice here. I'm never going to see accountability. Nobody's going to believe me. And I'm in danger for speaking out. And I can't, there's just this huge measure of relief that somebody is listening, somebody is moving forward. And that, but again, cautiously, because of course he's still going to use his resources to try to fight this, which he has the right to do, of course. But it is an intimidating process for these individuals who've come out even now. So I say cautious optimism and hope.
And are you surprised that Diddy's defense attorney and the defense side is appearing so confident throughout all of this? Again, Diddy was this person who was held in such high esteem. A lot of people were so intimidated by him because of his power and his wealth and his influence that I think a lot of people didn't actually think he would end up behind bars and has to stay there until the sex trafficking trial. What are your thoughts on just this outward appearance of confidence that he will beat these charges? I believe his defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said that he will testify in this case because he believes he's innocent and is chalking, the freak-offs to consensual acts.
Yeah, Mark Agnifilo is a well-known, high-profile criminal defense attorney. He's very good at his job. I have to assume that the reason he's putting on this front of confidence is obviously to manipulate, the public and the potential jurors down the road and just, have a strong showing for his client. Nobody wants to necessarily appear fearful of a prosecution. They want to show, we have every right to defend ourselves. We have every reason to believe that things are going to go our way. Once the truth comes out, I've been painted as, my client's been painted as a bad guy, but the truth will eventually come out. And of course, look, there's only so many defenses you could have in this type of situation. It's not like he could go with, it wasn't me. It's not a whodunit. Everybody who's accused him knows who he is. There's not going to be an alibi here. So he has to say that everything here was consensual and that all of these charges are just drummed up, overcharged events. Obviously, he's going to go with everybody wanted to be around Diddy. They wanted to be around his influence. They voluntarily put themselves there for the benefit of their own careers and their own popularity. And this is, freaky, and maybe it's frowned upon by polite society, but it's not a crime. That's, the position that they're going to take.
All right. Well, Serena Townsend, I really appreciate your insight into this story. Before we sign you off, anything else you'd like to add?
No, but thank you so much. You've been covering this. Law and Crime's been covering this. We kind of saw that this was coming, and now, I think it'll be a very interesting case to watch develop.
All right, Serena Townsend, again, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And at this time, Sean Combs, a.k.a. Diddy, remains behind bars in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. His next scheduled court date is slated for October 9th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Milner.